are vapes better than cigarettes? So is vaping better than smoking regular cigarettes? Again, it's a very common question that's asked. And a lot of people assume that they'll say things like, "Oh, it's got to be better for you," because you don't have the harmful tobacco, or "Oh, it can be a real good way to help people on the way to quitting smoking." And actually, the answer really is the evidence is showing quite the opposite. So, in a nutshell, vapes are equally as bad as cigarettes, if not worse. We can't say 100% for sure what the long-term effects are going to be, because we don't have the data. We don't have that long-term data over 40, 50, 60 years like we've got with smoking cigarettes. Vapes haven't been around that long. But we do know that they are not good for you. All right. We know this because, well, look, it's not safe. Okay. Back in 2020 and 2019 as well, the Center for Diseases Control in America, the CDC, started looking at something called EVALI. So this was e-cigarette or vaping use associated lung injury. And there were a lot of people, over 2,000, in fact, almost 3,000, who were admitted to hospital, and there were 68 deaths attributed to that condition. Okay. And what was happening was that a lot of people were thinking that vaping was fine. They were taking it up. They were particularly amongst youngsters, and there were a lot of problems that were coming from that. There was scarring on the lungs. There were all this kind of stuff caused by the nicotine, the ultrafine particles that are inhaled deep in the lungs. There were other particular things that they think may have been contributing specifically to this outbreak. But the point is there are lots of these what we call volatile organic compounds that are built into vaping. Okay. And they're causing a lot of problems. Okay. So these THC containing e-cigarettes or vaping products are known to be harmful. Okay. Now, the research that we do have also suggests that vaping is going to cause problems for lungs. Overall, compared to a non-smoker, if you vape, the risk of having lung problems or heart problems is increased. Okay. So nicotine is something that raises your blood pressure. It's going to spike adrenaline. That increases your heart rate, and that in turn increases the risk of heart attack. Okay. So there's also data coming through that chronic lung diseases like asthma are being increased, or the risk of it is being increased through vaping, okay, including cardiovascular diseases we've mentioned. All right. Now, in terms of to the degree that there is an addictive element to smoking, well, why take up something else where you're just getting pure hits of the nicotine? The problem is that in cigarettes, there's a certain, so we say, fixed amount of nicotine in the leaves, and that can be manipulated to some extent. But when it comes to vaping, the amount of nicotine can be 5, 10, even 20 times that in the cigarette, which means that the overwhelming hit in your brain and the trigger for dopamine and noradrenaline is going to get much, much higher. It's going to make it harder, really, for your body physiologically to be able to handle it. Okay. Probably the biggest concern, and I was really shocked about this with the e-cigarettes, was that my son, who's 12 and at school, told me that he's virtually the only person in his year who doesn't vape, that it's considered socially acceptable, that the local shops sell them to to older people, and then they sell them on to kids, and that they're smoking them. And that, to me, is truly terrifying. He said every day there's this kind of social pressure to do that, and he's saying no to it. But he said, it's hard because everyone's doing it. And we know that e-cigarettes are especially unsafe for children, for teens, for young adults. all right? Because they contain all these harmful chemicals, all right? Some of them will contain formaldehyde, some of them will contain, they obviously contain nicotine. Nicotine does have an addictive component, all right? But what it does is it affects adolescent brain development, okay? And adolescent brain development carries into the mid-20s. So there are other harmful chemicals in there, and young people who start smoking and vaping are more likely to smoke regular cigarettes in future. So it's simply not we simply can't say that, you know, vaping is better than cigarettes. It's harmful. It's a gateway drug. We don't know quite how. We honestly don't know quite how bad it is, but we know even this month here in the UK, we had reports of people being admitted to hospital who've been smoking or been vaping rather. They've taken up vaping and they've been vaping for a month, and it's been so bad on their lungs they've ended up in hospital. All right. So look, a lot of vape products don't disclose that they contain nicotine. There are even some vape liquids that are marketed as containing 0% nicotine, and when researchers have looked into this, they have contained nicotine. All right. If the adolescent brain, as we say, is developing up to age 25, then they're making it dependent on a drug at that young age is, of course, not a healthy thing. All right. So it affects the part of the brain that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control. That's what the research is saying. So adolescents, so young teens who are, or even kids in my son's age, like 12, that harms the brain, or the parts of the brain that control attention, learning, mood, impulse control. These are all things that's really vital for children. You know, if we have generations growing up thinking vaping's okay, what's it going to do to their attention? What's it going to do to their mood? What's it going to do for the people who are having, you know, ADHD and all its many flavors, or other so-called neurodiverse, sort of developmental disorders? Okay, so nicotine changes the way that our brains harness and build memories. Okay, so the way it works is, you know, in brief, is each time a new memory is created or a new skills learned, there are stronger connections between those brain cells. So the synaptic connections, okay, they're built and they're reinforced through the brain cells, like a hewing away through a forest. It's like clearing out a way between them to communicate. Okay, those young brains, we know it, we've seen it around us. Youngsters tend to learn things quicker than adults because they're forming these synapses quicker. Okay, but what nicotine does is it changes the very way in which those synapses are formed. Okay, and let's face it, if people grow up addicted to one particular drug, the odds of them being addicted to something else later on are going to be higher. Okay, there's also the problem of nicotine withdrawal then, if they're not able to do that. Okay, so look, we're still learning about the long-term effects of e-cigarettes. Okay, and it's very important to realize that when people smoke and they're vaping, or they're having sort of the equivalent of e-cigarettes or vaping, it's not just harmless water vapor that they're getting that, you know, sometimes gets touted. There's nicotine, there's these ultra fine particles, there's cancer causing chemicals. Sometimes there are heavy metals that have been found, like nickel or lead or even tin. All right, there are flavorings that are added, some of which are chemicals that are linked to heart diseases. All right, so or in one case, you know, a lung disease. Okay, so it's important to understand vaping is most definitely not better than smoking. It may be equally as harmful, But there are a lot of problems. There are a lot of problems associated with it. Okay, there's a huge amount of uncertainty about what it will do to somebody long term. There's also a growing real concern about what that's going to do to young brains, that are being formed, and honestly, for even brains that once we're past the adolescent brain, it's still doing harm. It's not something that we really want to see encouraged. Yes, it has been normalized. We walk down our streets now, and virtually every corner has got one of these things touting their vaping products and the smells and the flavors. And yes, they are marketed heavily at children. And yes, they're marketed as being very cool and everything else. But if you're looking at the logical side, that they're just the facts around this, pretty much everything that we've learnt about vaping is that it's bad for you in the same way that smoking was. Okay, and if you think back to some of the old arguments about smoking, people used to say, well, we can't be sure that it's harmful for you. They could maybe say that 50 years ago, but they can't say that now because the evidence is overwhelming. So vaping and any of those kind of ways of smoking, the kind of newer ways using technology, they haven't been around long enough for us to say we have this solid data set. All we can say is, looking at what it's doing now and the way that people are taking this up, it's absolute madness to take that up, because all the signs are that it's very, very bad. It's promoting a psychological and a physiological addiction in youngsters, in all people. There are a lot of harmful chemicals in it. A lot of people have ended up in hospital. A lot of people have been having problems with their breathing as a result of it, and many other problems. And it's only likely that we're going to have, of course, we're going to have more data over time, and that data is just going to expand the challenges around that. Okay, so whether you're smoking cigarettes or whether you're smoking vaping, the smart thing to do is to look to put a plan in place that's going to work for you to quit. Okay, it's certainly not the smart move to move from smoking cigarettes to vaping, because you're simply swapping one set of problems for another. Okay, fundamentally, you're going to have to deal with what's driving driving that behavior anyway, and what's driving that are unmet psychological and emotional needs. It's a habit. So what's driving this is a habit, and you can absolutely change that habit. You can totally change that. There are ways in which you can quit smoking in one session. You can do it in one session. You can stop, you can quit, you can be a non-smoker, you can do that. And if you're vaping and you've gone down that route, then treat it exactly as stopping smoking. Okay, you're just quitting this and you're going to do that. Just be aware that you're going to have some challenges around the way that you feel, around the expectations, around how you're going to manage your life, how you're going to deal with it without all the paraphernalia around you, how you're going to maybe manage boredom, how you're going to manage rewarding yourself, how you're going to relax, all these kind of things. And that's where finding somebody who's a stop smoking expert can really, really help you and really be of great benefit, because they can help you to make the changes that you want to make, in an easy way, in a straightforward way, without the pain of going through months and months of struggle. Okay, so once you know that vaping is not really better for you than smoking, well, then you have the information that you need that can help you start to set your strong personal reason for change, so that then you can make your decision about what you want to do to really change that. Because remember, if you don't change anything, all that's going to happen is you're just putting yourself at risk until maybe something bad happens, maybe it doesn't. But you're going to live with that uncertainty and that concern in the background, that nagging feeling, and nothing's going to get better. Okay, far better to make a decision to deal with what's really going on underneath that's driving the habit, so that you can change it and you can stop vaping, or you can stop considering the idea of vaping to stop smoking and simply just quit and be a non-smoker.